Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited. Season 11, the podcast. I can't even believe that it's season 11. But I still enjoy doing interviews and having fabulous guests on the show. And today is no exception. On today's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, we have with us Christopher Bylone. Christopher is a global data-centered belonging practitioner who built an award-winning enterprise-wide DE&I program at a multinational Fortune 500 company. He uses a best practice mindset to design, execute, and manage a multi-point strategy that is globally consistent. Christopher believes in achieving a full sense of belonging. Organizations need to put inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility at the front of all initiatives to ensure all people can be their bold, authentic selves at work with the knowledge that they belong and are a value add to the organization culture. He currently serves as the global head of belonging at Krispy Kreme. He's based in Charlotte metro area with his husband, 2 boys, and their dogs. I'm delighted to have him on the show. Christopher, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having this conversation. Really excited to be talking about career journeys today.
Absolutely. I'm all about being in the driver's seat. And when leaders come on, I'm always immediately curious about, well, first of all, are you in the driver's seat for your career?
I would say yes. I think for me, I have made deliberate decisions about the roles I take and haven't taken. I think for me, uh, I was in a job search recently, right? So I'm at Krispy Kreme now, and I was very deliberate in when I was interviewing at organizations, telling my potentially future bosses what I was and was not willing to do, and said to them, "Look, like if you're gonna hire me as a DEI professional, you need to know what you're getting. Uh, I am here to come into the organization to help change policy, practice, and process. Right? I'm not here to just do performative DEI work. So if you're looking to hire a performative DEI person, I'm not your person. Right? Very clear up front because that wasn't what I was willing to do. And I knew that there were some roles that were not going to be right for me. And even when I was interviewing, even though these companies would say, "Oh yes, we're not doing performative work. We really want to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty." As I was talking to folks, I would start to realize, no, actually, they're looking for somebody who's doing performative work, and I chose to remove myself from the process because I knew it wasn't going to be a good fit. I would be frustrated in the role. They would be frustrated with me. No, so happy to land where I landed.
That's awesome. How did you get to a place where you're so confident in who you are authentically, where, interviews generally cause a lot of angst and to say, this is what I'm going to do, this is not what I'm going to, how do you develop yourself as a leader so that you're able to stand in your authenticity, your truth, and show up that way?
It takes time, right? I think it's one of those things where I would not be able to do that 15 years ago, right? I think 15 years ago I was very much an individual who was just thankful for the job that somebody would offer me, right? I do think it's part of just growing up, being mature, and getting to know what I want to do, right? I feel like I finally have grown up. I'm in my 40s and I feel like I'm actually an adult now, right? And it's but it's spending time with yourself, right? It's making sure you know who you are. Right? I even say this about getting into a relationship, right? If you can't love yourself, how can you love somebody else?
Mm.
And if you don't know who you are as a leader, how can you help create other leaders? And I think also just being in the space that I'm in, um, I think just I've kind of done being fake, right, or putting up a facade, um, and just being authentically me, right? And if that's not going to fit for an organization, okay, I'll find an organization that wants me, the authentic Christopher that
Hmm.
comes along.
I love that. Let's carry on with that conversation and tell me about what you think are the key ingredients to successfully taking ownership of your career or owning your career.
So, number one, I think it's you have to have a network. You uh, and you have to feed your network like you feed your soul,
Mm.
right? If you're not feeding that network and keeping it healthy, how can you expect your network to work for you when you need it?
Mm.
Right? There have been many times in my career, in my life, and made drastic career changes. Right? I mean, if you just look at my LinkedIn bio, right? I have an agriculture degree.
Mm.
Right? I have a bachelor's of science in agriculture. I thought I was going to take over the family farm. Right? That was my journey. Then I went into higher education and worked in higher ed for a while. And then the economy had a downturn and was laid off and had to figure out what I was going to do to make money. And then wound myself up in HR and did a lot of temp work and went from assignment to assignment and was at an organization for a very long time and then left that organization. And every time I had made either drastic career shifts or just made decisions about where I was going or needed my network to help me recover or just help me progress, it was my network that did it. Right. And so, but I knew that I had to keep my network healthy. Um,
Mm.
and so for me, like that's so powerful and so important, right? If you don't, there's Gladwell has a book about the outliers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody is successful by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is a team around successful individuals. I am not where I am today by me alone, right? It is my mentors, it's my teachers, it's my former bosses, it's my colleagues that I have worked with over the years, it's my family. They have all made me successful because they have given me the support system to be success, to have success in my life. Now, granted, I am owning that and I'm in the driver's seat, but I would not be able to do what I'm doing without the support system around me to allow me to do what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. 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 You said something interesting about the network. Feed your network, like you feed your soul. How does one feed your network?
Um, it's when you need career advice, offer career advice back. When somebody is, you know, needs to pick up a phone and just vent because they're having a really bad day, be that person that they can vent to because you're probably going to need to vent to somebody else, right? So that old adage of do unto others as you would like done to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, be that person for your network, right? I give kudos on LinkedIn, right? Be sharing people's posts, celebrating it. Something it may seem so small, but on LinkedIn, when it notifies me that people have a birthday, I say happy birthday. It takes me 2 seconds, right? just to say happy birthday. And I can't tell you, the ROI on that is huge. Like, people are shocked that I have said happy birthday. I say, especially internally in my own organization, we're spread out all over the place. And so I just say good morning to people through Teams, right? I send text messages to folks, right? I've been like, hey, how's your day going? Haven't heard from you in a while. Just keeping it alive, right? Keeping that network warm. So it's feeding your network so that when you call upon it, it will return back to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. I say happy birthday too. I mean, LinkedIn could not make it any easier to just, you don't have to think. You just click a button. So
Click a button.
it's just click a button and you've done something thoughtful. So I think that's great advice to really, quite honestly, I didn't know about the power of networks until I left corporate America. You really, when you need that network and you have to build it and cultivate it, I think it's solid advice. I want to go back to the pivot and talk about career pivots, because we're noticing a lot more career pivots these days because the times are calling for introspection. And so you did a lot. You mentioned agriculture. When back in the day I was going to be a buyer, I have a retail management degree, right? So are there any tips that you have learned along the way to be successful at the pivot? I know you talked about the network. Is there anything else that is helpful when you decide, I want to change, I want to pivot in my career?
Be open to folks who see something in you that you don't see in yourself,
Mm.
right? I have always said that in talking with folks, say, look, like, I might be interviewing for this job, but if you see a skill set that I have that you think would be a better fit someplace else, let's have that conversation, right? Because you never know where you will be needed, where your skill set is. Like, when I started at International Flavors and Fragrances, I started out in people analytics,
Mm.
right? I did not start out in the DE&I role that I left. And that was a very deliberate decision because I had a recruiter reach out to me and been like, hey, Christopher, you have a really great HR background, but it also looks like you're really good at data. Would
Mm.
you be interested in joining this organization who was looking for somebody to help them stand up their people analytics function? I had never thought about people analytics in my life, right? I wasn't a trained data scientist. I liked it. So for me, I then said, hey, you know what? Somebody is interested in me. They see a talent that I can bring to the organization. Um, why not? Right? And so, be open to that, but also know where you want to go and know what you're not willing to do. Right?
Mm.
You have to be open to the pivot, because if you're not open to the pivot, that's okay. Right? You can, I'm not opening to pivoting anymore. Right? I'm set in DE and I. Right? I'm open to pivot to different types of industry and those type of things. But me, I'm chief diversity officer. That's what I'm going to be doing the rest of my career. Um, but know where your skill sets lie, but also make sure that you are diversifying yourself along the way. Yes, I was in agriculture, but I was really interested in leadership development. And so when I had to pivot away from agriculture, because it wasn't a choice, right? The farm went out of business. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career when I was graduating college, had not really a clue until somebody said, Christopher, you're really good at leadership development. Have you thought about going into student life and helping student organizations? And I was like, never thought about that. Right. But because I was showing other talents, people were able to see something in me that I wasn't able to see in myself. And I was open to the pivot.
Be open to feedback about your talents. One of the things that I've done in the past is a natural aptitude test, and that gives you some insights as to where you're really good. I wonder, have there been resources that you have used, books, podcasts, TED Talks, whatever it is, Audible, things that have helped you that stand out to you in your career that is really game changing resources? Any of those that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so I would say Myers-Briggs, the
Mhm.
Myers-Briggs assessment was really good, was really helpful for me. I would say, I did a DISC assessment. I've done the Gallup, I'm blanking on the name at the
Is
moment.
that the Strength Finder?
The Strengths Finder, yes, Strengths Finder did that. And, you know, reading books, to me, going back to Gladwell's The Outliers. I also remember when I got laid off from in higher education, there was a book that said, I think it was titled "You're Welcome, You're Fired." And it was like it's okay to be fired. Like sit in that, right? Take this as an opportunity to um, go on your self exploration, right? And in some ways, I look back at that experience and say, you know what, I'm glad I got laid off,
Hmm.
and say, okay, I took that as an opportunity to make a change, make a transition, figure out what I wanted to do with my career, but I wouldn't have done it if I was still in that role, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, figuring out what those resources are, um, I've listened to your podcast, shameless plug. That's been really helpful. So that's been, for me, understanding who I am as an individual has really been helpful to understand where my career journey was going to go.
Awesome. But talk to us about risk because you recently relocated, you made a shift, and you also talked about a lot of pivots. And there's an element of risk that we have to embrace in our careers. What's your perspective on the necessity for taking risk and any tips around that?
Um, well, make sure you have the ability to take the risk, right? When I left my previous employer, it was a conversation with my husband that said, "Are we ready for that? Right? Is this something that we can financially manage?" Right? To make sure that you have that. We had the privilege that we had the financial vitality for me to leave my employer and job search for 6 months, right? And we also said, we had the conversation of, okay, are we going to stay in the state that we were currently living? And are we willing to move? And what we said was just given where our sons were in school, kind of their time, we had a rising junior and a rising sixth grader at the time. It was like if we don't move now, we can't move for a couple years, right? Because I didn't want to disrupt my high schooler between junior and senior year,
Mhm.
right? Because that would be like disrupting a high schooler is bad anyway, right? You're gonna get the worst parent of the year award, right? I
Oh
did,
no.
I did, right? But I say that in seriousness, right? Because I knew that while it was a risk, he had time to recover.
Hmm.
I knew if we waited a year, he would not be able to recover between junior and senior year, right? It would not set him up for success, right? So it's evaluating where can you take the risk, right? And so we knew that this was the right time to move. We also said, look, like this is a big move, right? We moved from Connecticut to Charlotte. There's no turning back, right? And so are you okay? Were we okay taking this massive leap? Right? This was a irrecoverable move, right? Like we couldn't say, oh, it's not working out, let's go back, right? We sold our house, so we really had to think long and hard. Is this a risk we were willing to take? And this is not a decision that I made by myself, right? This was a family decision. We had a family meeting and said, "Okay, Papa is needing to find a new job, and are we willing to move?" And our boys were part of the conversation and were part of the decision of me saying yes to my current employer.
I love that. I have an 8-year-old and I'm just imagining her and being a part of, they grow up so quickly now. That's awesome. I love to hear that. If you were to write a book, I don't know if you're in the process of doing that or have done that, but what would the title be if you think about your career body of work? What would you name the title of the book?
What would I name the title of my book? I would say probably unapologetically authentic, right?
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I,
mm.
I, I am Christopher Bylone through and through. You get the same Christopher at home as you do in the office, good, bad, or indifferent. And so, I'm here, I'm me. And I think that's probably, if I was to title it down to a little bit easier to pronounce book, I Am Me.
Mm, I love that. It's been such an insightful conversation to have you on the podcast to share your insights on navigating your career. Are there any parting words that you'd love to leave with the listeners?
Yeah, utilize LinkedIn.
Mm,
That's probably one of the spaces that I know has helped me with my career. Um, Find your mentors. I would not be where I am today, network aside, my mentors. And you know, shout out to Marie Mann, shout out to Michelle Meyer Ship, shout out to my mother. I am a mama's boy, I'll admit that. But your mentors are so important. If you don't have one, get a couple, right?
mm,
Have a couple mentors, and not ones that are your yes people, right? They're have your yes people, right? Who inflate your ego and make you feel good, but make sure you have the people who are gonna, kind of remove the blinders, call bullshit, right? And hold you accountable. And I got to tell you, my mentors have done that for me, and that has been the best thing that could have happened uh, along my journey. So have mentors and have a number of mentors.
I love that. I love that. Can you tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd like to do so?
Sure. So find me on LinkedIn, Christopher Bylone. You can find me there. Happy to connect with you. Shoot me a message. That's probably going to be the best way to get in touch with me. And I do respond to LinkedIn messages. So I'm here. If you send one, it's not going to go cold. You will hear back from me.
Awesome. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for stopping by the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.